Rule number 73. The gerund and gerundive are used in the genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative cases in many different constructions. This rule focuses on two specific forms, the gerund and the gerundive. In short review, the gerundive is effectively the future passive participle, and we see it in a construction like cupido montes ascendendi, a desire of climbing the mountain. The key with the gerundive is that it's an adjective. In this phrase, our gerundive ascendendi agrees in case, number, and gender with montes. Both are genitive, masculine, singular. And literally, this phrase means a desire of the mountain to be climbed. But it's so much better to translate the gerundive as climbing and make the mountain its object. And we also have the gerund, which we see in a phrase like ars bene vivendi, the art of living well. Similar to the gerundive, we translate the gerund here as living. While the gerundive is an adjective, the gerund is a noun. But that said, these two words are related to each other. Notice that both have the characteristic nd in their ending, and just like in the terms gerund and gerundive. This rule is going to look at the similarity between the gerund and gerundive, like what we've seen here with the ing translation of each word. One more point to discuss before we move on. As we see with the cupido montes ascendendi, the gerundive ascendendi requires the noun montes, since it's an adjective, and we translate this noun as if it were an object of the gerundive. The mountain is receiving the action of climbing. In contrast, the gerund tends to be used when there isn't an object, cupido ascendendi, a desire of climbing, maybe with the phrase in caelum, into the sky, to complete our meaning. But you do see accusative objects of gerunds, and the phrase cupido montem ascendendi is perfectly acceptable, even if less common than the gerundive phrase, montes ascendendi. Let's look at the gerund and gerundive in the so-called oblique cases, that is, the genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative. We've already seen the genitive used after the noun cupido, and here's another example with a gerund and gerundive in the genitive case from Caesar. Neque consili habendi, neque arma capiendi, spatio dato. With a bit of time given, and this is an ablative absolute, neither for forming a plan nor for grabbing weapons. Habendi here is a gerundive because it modifies the genitive noun consili, but capiendi is a gerund, a noun, which takes the accusative object arma. But regardless of their forms, both of these are in the genitive case, dependent on the noun spatio. And often the genitive gerund and gerundive are an objective genitive, like here. Rule number 20. The dative is often found after certain adjectives, especially those related to fitness or suitability, and we use our standard for translation of the dative here. This is really a form of rule number 33, the dative with adjectives. Genus armorum aptum tegendis corporibus, the kind of weapons or armor suitable for protecting bodies. Our gerundive is tegendis, modifying corporibus. Or perhaps we might have a ship suitable for sailing, navis idonea navigando. Our gerund is navigando. Notice that it's a noun here, not modifying anything, for sailing. Here's a list of the adjectives that we commonly see with gerunds and gerundives. We also see the dative used in certain expressions after verbs, like diem dicunt celebrando. They declare a day for celebrating. Celebrando is our dative gerund. The ablative case of the gerund and gerundive is used in prepositional phrases, like Cicero's in laudando et in vituperando, in praising and in blaming. The ablative also is used without a preposition to show manner, Rule 50, means, Rule 47, cause, Rule 43, and other things. Multa pollecendo persuadet. He persuades them by promising many things. And here we have the gerund pollecendo taking an accusative object, multa. Or his ipsis legendis, by reading these very things. Finally, we see the ablative after comparatives, Rule 45, where an action is the object of comparison. Nullum officium referenda gratia, magis necessarium est. No duty is more necessary than repaying kindness. Our gerundive phrase referenda gratia is our ablative of comparison. One more example, the gerund and gerundive can also be used to express purpose when used with the prepositions ad, which takes the accusative case, and gratia or causa, which take a preceding genitive case. So that is, the genitive comes before the causa or gratia. So Cicero says to Catiline, vivis non ad deponendam sed ad confirmandam audaciam. You live not for setting aside, but for strengthening your boldness. Our gerundives deponendam and confirmandam, both describing audaciam, show Catiline's purpose for living, so Cicero says. Later on, Cicero accuses Catiline of doing something vitandae suspicionis causa, for the sake of avoiding suspicion. Note that our gerundive phrase comes before the causa. This use of the gerund and gerundive after the preposition ad is the only time we see these words in the accusative case. Latin prefers to use the infinitive, another verbal noun, when the action is the subject or object of a verb. So ars bene vivendi, the art of living well, uses the gerund, while vivere est bonum, living is good, has an infinitive as the subject of est. The gerund likely came from the gerundive use, so Latin started with a phrase like cupido montis ascendendi, a desire of the mountain to be climbed or of climbing the mountain, where the action of climbing depends on the noun it describes, in this case, montis. But when the desire is of just an action, say climbing, it's an easy step to use the gerundive impersonally in the neuter gender. And so we get the gerund cupido ascendendi in caelum, a desire of climbing into the sky. And the ablative gerund evolves into the present participle in Spanish and Italian. Cantando is singing in both languages, and it looks like an ablative gerund with the ando ending, but it's really an adjective, a present participle in these languages. And so this has been rule number 73. The gerund and gerundive are used in the genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative cases in many different constructions.